All right, today we're talking about bass guitar. Sadly, Ian could not be here because he is neither funky nor fresh enough to contribute on the bass guitar for this track. But basically, we're going to kind of break it down into the parts, and I'm going to talk about how I followed the chords and actually some of the stuff that Ian was playing to kind of just come up with like a pretty relatively simple bass line that just kind of supports the lower end of the song. So basically, the main verse, if you remember from the other videos, it kind of starts out on this B note. B to E to D sharp to C sharp, right? So if we just do the simplest thing on bass, and if you want to watch the video I made on kind of like how to like just play along on bass, like an absolute beginner's approach, if you've never really played with the instrument, you're just playing the root note of each chord. So if we just did that, it would sound like B, E, D sharp, C sharp. You could do it on every, you could pulse it like. By the way, this is a Rickenbacker 4003, absolutely awesome bass guitar. I'm playing it in the bridge position for most of this, not for the whole thing, really. But basically the way that we're gonna kind of follow what Ian was doing is gonna take some of the principles of having the root note, which again, starting on this B, but instead of pulsing the whole thing, we're gonna kind of swing it a little bit to try to follow what the kick drum is doing, so like. So basically, it starts off with the root note of those chords, the B into the E. So what I'm doing there is I'm getting the E, which is the 7th fret on the A string. And again, if you have no idea about bass, it's just the first 4 strings of a guitar, E, A, D, G, for most situations. And I'm just getting the root note, so now 7th fret on the E string, twice to the E, which is 7A. And the cool thing about playing an E here on a bass is you can get the E below it by just hitting the lower string, right? So we've got, and then to the D sharp. And that right there is what Ian was doing on the slide guitar from the last video. So I'm just kind of copying the little melody that he was doing to try to like support it. So I'm just going, which is all on the A string, 4, 6, 4, 2, 4, back. 2, 4, 6, 4, 2, and he kind of switches back and forth between those. So for the instrumental parts of the verse chords, I'm doing the same thing. And then once the lyrics come in, I'm really just kind of following the chords a little more closely, just like a B, E, D sharp. And all that is, same thing. I've got my root note to a root note to the root note below it. Now when I get to the D sharp, what I'm doing here is I'm just going up a string. And the nice thing about this is the 5, if you see that other video, the 5 is a really important number in kind of simpler bass playing. When I say the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 5th of this note is right here, but you can go an octave below to grab the 5th below it. And you can always kind of play that note with almost any note in a bass song or whatever. So. And the nice thing about that is when you go to this, the C sharp and go up to the 5th below, you can slide back into the root note of the first chord. Okay, so I almost kind of have this little box type thing that I've got going on over and over again. So those are just kind of one of the ways I was kind of riffing over the verse chords. Now there are some variations. It can be like, depending on how busy you want to make it. And something to think about there is what else is going on in the track. Like, what are the vocals doing? I don't want to step all over it. I want to give it a lot of space. Bass is one of those instruments that can really eat up a lot of space in a mix, depending on how it's mixed, how it's played, all that stuff too. So the arrangement of it is really important. Which is kind of like why I like going to the octave E instead of just going like, you know, you can play it like that, but I think that lower register can kind of eat up a lot of tonal space, I suppose, is the way you could look at it. Now, for the choruses, we go to this. Which again, I'm just kind of really just ripping off what Ian was doing. So even though he's not here currently, he is here in spirit, because a lot of the bass line I was kind of following the slide guitar. And again, how he was doing it, just like how he explained it before, we start with the root note. We're going to the 2 in that scale, back to the next note, and then to here. So if we start on the 9th fret of the A string, 9, it's step, higher step, it's 2, back to 7, make a little riff out of that, those 3 notes. And then we end up on the 6th fret of the A string, which the chord is actually a B at that point. But I'm playing the 3rd of that major chord. And then the next chord is the A, but I'm going to play the 3rd there too. So we have a 3rd, do, do. And then I'm making a little kind of a run out of all those notes back into there. And then of course you gotta grab the kind of same riff that we did on the guitars from one of the other previous videos, but on a bass, so I'm kind of on the 14th fret of the D string, going back through it. Okay, so there are some variations in there, and another part that I'll do is, instead of always following the slide, I could just follow the root notes. So that's just kind of every root note. Now the great thing is about the key of the song is that E and A are in the scale that we're using. So if I want to kind of like spice up one of those notes, I can always kind of hammer on an open E. So it's just one way that the open notes can help you out, and that's why it's good to know what notes are in a key or a scale, because you can know what other notes you can kind of rely on in different situations. Now, after that, I guess the breakdown part. Following the acoustic guitar, E, octave, E, G, A, and then just following the chords backwards. And then we go into Ian's guitar solo part, which is just 2 chords, so I'm just going to stick with those 2 notes. before when you can hammer on. It's just a root, a fifth, and then hammering on the open string. And really just kind of mix them up however you want. That's what I was doing. And then my solo part, just follow the chords. To the A. Just the root notes, straight up root notes. Maybe at the fifth. And then finally end back on the chorus. So, it's an excellent lesson in ripping off Ian to kind of come up with like a cool bass line, just following the chords, knowing where the 1, the 5, and if it's a major chord where the third is, or a minor chord where the minor third is. And honestly, just armed with that, you can kind of create pretty simple but groovy, somewhat melodic bass lines, and that's kind of how I chose to approach it in this song. So if you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments, on Twitter, on Instagram, or the website, and we'll get back to you with the next part, which Ian better be here for that because I'm getting sick of doing this, carrying all the weight myself. So until next time.